$20 million part-time, 2 to 4 hours per week. I hope I got your attention. I'm Andy Heller, and I'm a real estate investor and an educator. And I'm going to talk about my journey, which can become, hopefully, your journey. And I hope that this short video inspires a lot of you. Years ago, in my late 20s, I wasn't happy where I was with my day job. And like a lot of people, I wanted to improve my life. And I looked to real estate. Why? Real estate is the one investment where one can leverage cash. In other words, you can take a small amount of money, buy a property worth a much bigger value, and leverage that small amount of money to make great profits. So that became my vehicle of choice to grow my net worth. So I met this guy named Scott. We decided to pool our resources. And what we chose to do was to buy pre-foreclosures. These are properties where families get behind in their mortgage and they're about to lose their properties, and flip them for quick profit. That was our original plan. And I want you to remember this when we get to the end, when you realize how we end up making money, because we certainly diverted from our original plan. So that was the plan. Buy pre-foreclosures and then flip the property. Now, I was young. I was living in an apartment. I had a roommate. So the plan, so that we would minimize our holding costs while we fixed up the property, was I would cancel my lease in the apartment, move in with a buddy into the apartment, into the home while we fixed it up, and live there while we put it on the market. Didn't seem like a big inconvenience to make a good amount of money. I was going to give my friend a pretty cheap rent. But again, we're only going to be there 2 or 3 months. All right, no big deal. So when you're buying pre-foreclosure, investors who use this strategy, they subscribe to a list of properties in the state that are going through foreclosure. Now, in this country, any property about to be foreclosed on has to be published for public consumption within 30 days of the foreclosure sale. In other words, if there's a foreclosure sale on October 1, 30 days around September 1st, that pending foreclosure has to be published by the lender. So investors who buy pre-foreclosures subscribe to these lists, and we send out bandit letters to these families that says, hey, I'm here to help you. I know there's a very small window, so by the time they get that letter, we're talking maybe 2 weeks, but I can act fast and buy this property and save your credit and maybe give you a bit of cash. That's the model, the primary model for investors who buy pre-foreclosure. So we subscribe to a physical report. We got the letters out quickly, and a low percentage come back, but we would speak to the families and decide whether to go out to the property. So there were 2 families that answered. The first family, I went out to see the property. And long story short, everybody, it was a lovely family. The husband was a veteran, and I met the husband, I met the wife, I met the 2 kids, the little dog, and the little girl grabs me by the hand. She says, Andy, come here, look at here's the doggy window that daddy cut in the the back door, so our little dog can go outside without peeing in the house. And on theory, and actually in practicality, what they teach investors who are trying to buy pre-foreclosure is that you are helping these families because you're able to save their credit and sometimes give them a lot of cash. And that is absolutely correct. What they don't tell you is it is emotionally taxing. It is so difficult to meet with 20 or 30 of these families whose lives are falling apart to buy a property. I walked out of that home. I started bawling like a baby. All right. I said, this is really difficult. We got another call on the letters, and I spoke to this lady, and it sounded like it was just her life was imploding. She had a difficult divorce, a whole bunch of things I remember that was really challenging. And it sounded like, from talking to her, there's about 15% equity in the property. And I knew that that's not enough to give me a margin and give her a bit of money. And after that first experience, I had no desire to go out to that house. For some reason, I circled that property on the report because I saw that the foreclosing bank was a small bank in Atlanta. And a few days after the foreclosure sale, I called that bank. And I got hold of the person who was in charge of getting the property fixed up and ready to list. And basically, I said, look, I know I don't want you to change your plans. I'd like you to consider me as an alternative. If I can get into that property, I'll get a quick sale offer on your desk in a couple of days. And you can decide if that is of interest to you instead of holding that property for months, fixing it up, and finding a realtor. He said, sure. I left the key outside, going in, and let me know what you think. So I went to see the property, sent an offer, and 2 days later, it was accepted. And we got a bank loan too. We didn't even have a lot of cash. All right. And it was so easy, guys. There was no human emotion, no families whose life was falling apart. To this gentleman, it was a simple business transaction. So we bought our first property. So like I told you, I moved in with my buddy, but okay, we're only going to be there a couple months. Now, I was a young single guy in Atlanta. And I like to joke that this property was literally 45 minutes away from anything remotely fun to do in town. And all my neighbors has wives and kids, and that would be my world one day, but not in my late 20s. But it's okay. No big deal. I'm only going to be there a few months. Now, we put the property on the market, and the price was fair. 9 months later, not one bite. I called my buddy who I bought the property with. I said, Scott, look, I'm a single guy. I'm so far away from all the fun things I like to do. I am miserable. We can't flip the property is not attracting buyers. I got to get out of this house. So he said, Andy, I heard about this thing called a lease purchase, but a lot of the investors who do this, they are trying to actually take advantage of families by getting a lot of upfront money with no intention of selling the property. Why don't we turn this around inside out, give the lease purchaser a very fair and realistic chance to buy the property, and in theory, we should attract a higher caliber tenant. A higher caliber tenant would allow us to get the property rented fast and eventually make more money. So I said, that sounds great. I just got to get out of this house. So we took a property that we could not flip for 9 months, changed it from for sale by owner to for sale or lease purchase by owner. And in 3 weeks, we had a lease purchaser and I was out of that house. So let me say again, a property that we were unsuccessful flipping for 9 months, we lease purchased it in 3 weeks. So I come back to my buddy. I said, you know what, Scott? I don't know if a lot of people subscribe to these lists with the intention of just calling the lender after the foreclosure sale, but why don't we just do that? Because there's no human beings and no emotion involved, no distressed family. Everything we're buying with clean and clear title. There's nothing we're buying where we don't have a chance to go in and assess the property with our contractor so that we make sure that there's no surprises. And here's the best part. We're buying from a business that doesn't want the property in the first place. And once we establish that relationship, these are businesses that can sell us more and more and more properties. So he said, that makes sense. A year later, we bought our next property. A year later, we bought another property. And then this first property I'm talking about, it sold. And now we began to buy properties at a much faster pace. Ladies and gentlemen, my real estate partner and I have both had very successful careers. This side venture is typically would take 2 to 4 hours per week, both with the buy-in and researching and calling the lenders, looking at the properties, and eventually lease purchasing. And on the lease purchase, when you make the lease purchasers in charge of taking care of the property, we don't get nearly the calls that we get that your typical landlords get. And then another benefit is that as a lot of these properties sold, we got cash windfalls that we use to go and buy more properties. We average 2 to 4 hours per week, like I said, of work. We had successful careers, yet my friend and I have some years made more money in our part-time gigs than we were in our day job. This was in 1990 when we started. I'm dating myself. Almost 35 years later, we've bought and sold and still own properties that have greater than $20 million in profit and equity on a part-time basis. I hope that gets you excited. And the last part of our story here is that we actually talked about our model in a book in 2002 as the part-time investors. Our publisher called us 6 months later and said, guys, you better sit down. Fortune magazine got hold of your book and they want to interview you. And about 4 or 5 months later, this model that I've given you a very brief overview of here was actually recommended by Fortune magazine among the top 5 models for real estate investors. And since then, we've actually been teaching this to people like you around the country. I hope that the story has inspired you. And if it has, be sure and like and subscribe, and we'll be hopefully giving you a lot more tips for real estate investors of all levels of experience and interest. Good luck.